Actually, last Friday night, I went to see The Odyssey, which is sort of the big film of the year. The appetite for myth in America's mass pulpit, which is the theater and the movie industry, is still pretty strong. It's the biggest hit of the summer. It's provoked a lot of discussion, I think very interesting discussion. And it engages perennial questions. Some of you might have read The Odyssey in high school. I read it in anticipation of seeing the movie. I reread it over my vacation. It's a story of a man and a woman and a son looking to reclaim home and a future after the gods, the fates, a war, travel disasters, politics, enemies have destroyed a home and a future, and it's all hanging by a thread. Now, my friend Cale Zeldin teaches classics at a prep school in New England, and so he's taught this story for the last 10 years. And he had the great line on a podcast that he did with another friend of his. He said, "Myth is the story we live within." And the truth is, we all sort of live within an imaginative story. We imagine the world to be a certain way. We imagine some things are better than other things. We imagine some things are higher, and how to get to those higher things are sort of what drives our life. And in many ways, whether you count yourself to be religious or not, that's sort of your functional religion, those maps of the world that we have, and they're usually engaged by these great stories that we tell and we live within. Now, the great story of Israel, and which you find in the Bible, and that story intersects with other great civilizations such as Rome, is really a lot of what the Bible is about, especially in the New Testament and the Gospels, because Jesus is, of course, killed by Roman soldiers, put on trial by his own people. But what the status of the story of God and Israel and his reclamation project is, well, that's sort of tracked throughout the Bible. Israel was supposed to be the witness of the Creator God to a world that had rebelled and lost its way. Israel had failed in its mission. She couldn't keep the covenant. Her temple was destroyed and then rebuilt, and then a little before Jesus came, there was a great Herod, it's called Herod the Great, and he rebuilt the temple and made it glorious because he wanted to fashion himself as a Messiah. But Herod was very much a vassal and a puppet of Rome. In fact, he got his crown from Rome and his authority from Rome. And this sets up this great struggle between the history of Israel and Rome. Petty tyrants like the Herod family were sort of like suitors in an Odysseus sense, for we want to be the king, we want to be your beloved Israel, we want to be your husband. And Israel wavered. Do we wait for our God to show up? Will he show up? Sort of like Odysseus, he's been gone for so long that all the suitors and even the son and the wife thought, maybe he's dead. Maybe he's never coming back. Maybe we should just find another and move on. Well, in the end of the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus wraps up this story of the kingdom of heaven. They were in Jerusalem. They were looking at this amazing temple that Herod refashioned, impressed by the buildings. Jesus left the temple and was walking away when the disciples came up to him to call his attention to its buildings. "Do you see all these things?" he asked. "Truly I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down." Jerusalem in many ways was a small town with a massive building, and that building was a marvel of the ancient world, and people would come from all over the empire to see it. And Jesus says, this building is going away. It's going to be destroyed. The disciples naturally wonder, when? As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, looking over Jerusalem, the disciples came to him privately. "Tell us," they said, "when will this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming, of the end of the age? When is our world going to end? Now, I do a version of this sermon on Friday for YouTube, and that always changes a bit between Friday and Sunday. And this week, the movie has all of this tension in it about the sea peoples. When is the Bronze Age ending? And of course, there's a Bronze Age collapse, and you have Troy and the Greeks and their war, and that sort of ends one age and begins another. And so the disciples wonder, when is the age going to end? When is Jesus going to come back? When will God finally restore the kingdom to Israel? The question that the disciples ask in the book of Acts. Jesus answered, watch out that no one deceives you. Now, Odysseus returns to Ithaca in disguise because he knows everything's a mess and he wants to see what's what, and he wants to plan the restoration of his house. And so he's looking at all the servants. Because some of the servants, some of the female servants are sleeping with the suitors because they're angling they want to be on top when the revolution comes. Others of the servants are holding out for Odysseus, and they said, he's going to come back, he's going to come back. And even if he doesn't come back, I'm going to be faithful to him. Jesus tells his disciples, therefore keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. You also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. Now that term, the Son of Man, Jesus kept using of himself. The term comes out of Daniel 7, because Jesus basically said, what you saw in Daniel 7 will be like when I come, and the disciples want to know when. When? Who then is the faithful and wise servant, whom the master will put in charge of the servants in his household to give them their food at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. Truly I tell you, he will put him in charge of all of his possessions. But suppose that servant is wicked and says to himself, my master is staying away a long time. And then he begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and to drink with drunkards. Just look at Odysseus' house and the suitors there, eating up his kingdom. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and in an hour he is not ready for him. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. The relationship between the kingdom of heaven and the hiddenness of God is important to ponder. The kingdom of heaven is sometimes small and hidden. It's a treasure hidden in a field. It's a pearl of great price. The children and the poor in spirit receive it. The wealthy and the powerful and the proud, the kingdom hides from them. The apocalypse, which is a Greek word for unveiling, is the moment that the kingdom bursts out. Again, if you watch the Odyssey, Odysseus comes into his house dressed in rags, looking like a beggar. And then, of course, there's the ceremony of the bow. And Penelope says, I will only marry the man who can string my husband's bow. The bow is very hard, and so man after man tries to string that bow. And then, of course, the beggar in the back says, I'll try. And everyone laughs and mocks. He's a beggar. And then, of course, he bends the bow. And when he bends the bow, everyone in the room knows it's him. And they also know they're going to pay for what they've done. Apocalypse, unveiling. The truth is seen, and the judgment will be dispensed. It's inescapable, like a dragnet capturing fish. It's unexpected. Nobody knows when it will come. It's unwelcome by some, but others, like Penelope and Telemachus, finally the king has returned. Now, 2 parables are back to back. Now, I preached the first one 3 weeks ago. The parable of the 10 virgins. There were 5 virgins that had extra oil and were ready and were prepared and waited. And then there were unready virgins who were slothful, relaxed. And finally, when the master came late, when the bridegroom came late, they wanted to light their lamps and they had no oil. And so they said to the prepared ones, "Give us your oil." And they said, "No, we need it. Go into town and buy your oil now." And of course, they went into town, bought the oil, and when they came back, the door was shut. And the master said, the bridegroom said, "Get out of here. I don't know you." Again, in the kingdom of heaven, because both of these parables are side by side and they're parallel and they're about the kingdom of heaven. Again, the kingdom of heaven, will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold. Now, many of you who remember this will think of these as talents. Talents were a weight of measure, and they were significant weight. Each bag of gold in today's term might weigh 75 pounds. And in today's money, each bag of gold might be between $1 and $2 million. So when the king and the master gives a servant 5 bags of gold, this is investment money. This is not pocket change. This is, take this money, start a business, and when I come home, I want my return on investment. So he gave one 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. The master knew his servants, and he knows he's really top shelf. He's good and faithful, not quite as good as the first one. The third one, let's give him a chance. Give him a chance with $1 million? Yeah, we'll give him a chance. So then he went away on his journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once to put his money to work and gained 5 more. 100% return on investment. Excellent. So the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. 100% return on investment. Excellent. But the one who received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. I've been gone. I've given you millions to invest in. Let's see what you did. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. "Master," he said, "you entrusted me with $5 to $10 million. I gave you as much back again. 100% return." His master replied, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." The man with 2 bags came. "Master, you entrusted me with 2 bags. See, I've gained 2 more. His master replied, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." What's interesting is that the hiddenness of God, the absence of God, itself is put to use. Why? Because something is revealed in each of the servants. The true quality of the servants, the true nature of the servants is revealed by the absence. And in each of these cases, 100% return on investment. The master was right in his initial assessment of the servants and the talents and treasure that he gave to them. I love the end of the Narnia series, that great children's series of C.S. Lewis. At the end of the last battle, when everything seems to be falling apart, There's this rejuvenation of everything. After the last battle, the children begin to discover the new Narnia. To their surprise, they find not only their departed friends glorified and more alive than they were in this world, but they discover past heroes who are now glorified and renewed. Then Aslan turned to them and said, "You do not yet look as happy as I mean you to be." Well, that's a good thing to hear. Lucy said, "We're so afraid of being sent back, Aslan." Again and again in the stories, the children would go into Narnia and they'd have these great adventures. And at the end of the story, Aslan would come and say, "It's time to go home." And the children are like, "No! We love Narnia. We're kings and queens here. Now we're going to go back to be just nobodies in England." So at the end of this last battle, the children are thinking, "Oh, we're going to be sent back home, and no one will understand this alternative reality." "We're afraid you'll send us back, Aslan, as you have to our own world so often." "No fear of that," says Aslan. "Have you not guessed?" Guess they haven't. It's apocalypse. It's a revelation. It's an unveiling. Their hearts leapt, and a wild hope rose within them. "There was a real railway accident," said Aslan softly. "Your father and mother, and all of you are, as you used to call it in the Shadowlands, dead." Oh. That dream is ended. This is the morning. And as he spoke, he no longer looked to them like a lion. But the things that began to happen after that were so great and beautiful that I cannot write them. And for us, this is the end of all the stories. And we can most truly say that they all lived happily ever after. But for them, it was only the beginning of the real story. All their life in this world and all their adventures in Narnia had only been the cover and the title page. Now at last they were beginning chapter 1 of the great story, which no one on earth has read, which goes on forever, in which every chapter is better than the one before. That's what's happening in this story. I gave you this investment for this world. You've doubled it. Now I'm going to give you real money, real power, real opportunity. Now you've proven I can really invest in you with something substantial. Oh, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with few things. I will put you in charge of many things. That's unveiling. The servants are unveiled as to who they are. But you might say, we've only covered 2 of them. Then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. "Master," he said, "I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed." I think there's a reference to Israel there, because God sows in Israel and he reaps in the rest of the world. That's the mission of Israel. "So I was afraid, and I went out and I hid your gold in the ground. Here it is." There's always 3 in these parables. There's always 3 in the fairy tales. There's always 3. The servant that the master knew was least capable validated the master's suspicion. What had been given as an opportunity to surprise and to light, given the master's low reputation of him, instead has confirmed the master's estimation of the servant's value. There is a subtle blaming the master in the servant's excuse. "Well, you're hard, so I was scared, so I didn't do anything." It's the case that fear dominates and he's not willing to risk. Now, how will the master respond? His master replied, "You wicked and lazy servant. So you knew I harvested where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well then, you should have put the money on deposit with the bankers so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. I get nothing for what I put into you. So take the bag of gold with him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. And in another version of it, all the onlookers say, wait a minute, that's not fair. No, it's more than fair. For whoever has will be given more. Don't you see that in this world? It's true. And they will have an abundance. And whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. That's also true in this world. It's not always fair, but it's often true. It's not always good, but it's true. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And you know who's going to meet? The 5 virgins. These are put together in the same account. It's so interesting you have the men and the women. Did you ever notice that? Now in book 22, this is not in the movie. American audiences would not like this. In book 22 of Homer's Odyssey, all of the women that slept with the suitors, a dozen of them, they get executed. The execution takes place outside the main palace hall in the outer courtyard. It's the outer place, specifically squeezed into the narrow passage between the roundhouse and the courtyard wall. First, the unfaithful servants are forced to clean up the mess from Odysseus' bloodshed. Second, Odysseus commands Telemachus, his son, with the assistance of the swineherd and the cowherd, to carry out the execution. Odysseus tells Telemachus to hack the women to death with swords. However, Telemachus, who's been watching this and seething about it, decides that a quick death by sword is too good for the women who betrayed the household and slept with the suitors. Now, all the suitors are dead at this point. Instead, he ties a thick ship's cable across the courtyard between a pillar of the roundhouse and the yard's wall and hangs all 12 maidens, and they hang them as examples to everyone else. Hey, the ancient world was brutal. That's the world Jesus was living in. These are the stories that people lived within. Suddenly, the New Testament sounds a little tame. Now, the history of interpretation is very interesting in this. How can we understand these two stories? They seem to conflict with one another because the faithful virgins keep their oil. The faithful stewards risk their investment. The unfaithful steward kind of acts like one of the virgins who keeps. I buried it in the ground, it was safe. No, you don't understand. You have to know the master. The one story is, hold on. The next story is, risk, invest, be bold. The stories seem to conflict. The stories are aporic. What does that mean? It means they're a puzzle. They're surprising. They twist our mind. That's exactly what Apocalypse is supposed to do. We're supposed to look at it and say, and for years, part of the reason I made these kind of crazy things is I made sort of the standard Jesus knocking at the door. You know, that old thing from the 1950s? I used that same Jesus and said, he's closing the door. And so we read this description of Jesus and it confuses us. I thought Jesus was supposed to be nice. He's in fields with lambs and he's remembering little children and bringing them in. Yes. But he's also the master. And he's dealing with adults. And he's saying, I'm serious about my kingdom and my mission, and you should be too. These stories are supposed to shock us out of our natural lethargy, which waiting in absence builds us into. You can see it in the Odyssey. Everyone in Ithaca is like, He left 20 years ago. He's not coming back. Some of the servants, they had their doubts, but you know what? He's still my king. I'll still be faithful. I'm not going to join the suitors. The virgins are to conserve. The stewards are to invest. Faith for the virgins is costly holding. Faith for the stewards is risky dealing. The image of Jesus, the Son of Man, are meant to shock us out of the hiddenness of his glory and presence. And the focus is on the quality of his servants and their capacity to trust him. The absence and hiddenness is supposed to bring out the best of the faithful. You can see that in the Odysseus story. Now, in the movie, the swineherd is blind. In the book, the swineherd isn't blind, but Odysseus comes and discovers he's been faithful all along. Before, he knew that the swineherd was good, but after 20 years, the greatness of the steward is revealed. The absence creates the revelation of greatness. That's the point. This is apocalypse. Unveiling exposes the truth in a muddied world. And in fact, you don't know how great you can be until you are tested. It's the point of the test. Now, the world still appears muddled. And if there's anything true, and a lot of the critics of the movie have said, this isn't a real faithful Odysseus, he's too muddled. Well, okay, fair enough, it's a movie. The world always appears muddled. We can't tell the good guys from the bad guys, partly because we're both. Our hearts are on both sides of the door that Jesus is closing. Are we always faithful? Are we always unfaithful? We're right there in the middle, and the time of testing brings the best out of us or brings the worst out of us. And there's sometimes it brings out the best, sometimes it brings out the worst. But overall, you give it time and the truth is seen. The testing brings out the truth. Now, myth is the story we live within. Odysseus, his name, this is true of all these ancient stories, they're very complex. His name has a dual meaning. He's a multi-guy. He's a trickster. He's a liar. He's a storyteller. But right there in his name is sort of a dual qualityism. He is one who, in the poem, if you read him, he destroys cities. He conquers. He takes. He steals. He kills. But he also suffers. And throughout the story, his quality is he can endure suffering. And when he comes as a beggar to Ithaca, he knows he can kill any of these men one-on-one, but he has to stay covered. And they throw a stool at him, and they mock him, and they beat him, and he has to take it. It's not time for him to reveal himself to them. Does the story sound familiar? We're fascinated by these kinds of stories. It's interesting that peak hiddenness of God is in the moment of revelation. And we point to that peak hiddenness every time we have a cross. Where is God? Look at the cross. But that doesn't make any sense to the world. He appears to lose to his enemies in the most final and humiliating way. Odysseus gets beaten and humiliated, but he doesn't get killed. Jesus gets killed. His male followers flee and hide. Are there any faithful servants of Jesus? Well, the women, they hang back and watch. And John, who's probably too young to be a man, he hangs back and watch. But the men, Peter, who says, I'll die for you. Where's Peter? The Son of Man, the apocalyptic figure from Daniel 7, is also the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. Now, people would have known Odysseus in Jesus' time. There are many, it's not just Homer talking about him. They'd understand that. And if they paid attention, they would see that Jesus is a greater king than Odysseus. Jesus isn't just beaten, he's killed. Odysseus doesn't rise from the dead. Odysseus visits Hades and visits the casualties of the Trojan War, but Jesus will harrow hell and bring his people out. He will return to judge the living and the dead. When Odysseus dies, he's just dead. Jesus is revealed in Jesus' time of testing, just like all of us are revealed in our times of testing. That's what apocalypse is about. And there's always two sides. There's winning and losing. There's faithful and unfaithful. And throughout our lives, you can name the episodes, you've experienced both. But over the long run, your true quality will be revealed. Jesus is revealed in his time of testing. What will the faithful servants do? Jesus says, when his disciples say, "Now will you return the kingdom to Israel?" Jesus says, it's not the times and the dates that you have to worry about. You will be my witnesses. Unfaithful Peter? Yes. Unfaithful other disciples? Yes. You will be my witnesses. And so the question we ask is, do we live up to the Master? Who on the night he was betrayed, he took bread and he broke it. And he didn't say, this is what will come to all of my enemies. He said, this is my body, broken for you. Whenever you eat this, eat it remembering me.